Thanks so much for listening to No Lions Here with me, Big Panda. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to No Lions Here. My name is Big Panda, and I'm a recovering sex addict. Ladies and gentlemen, today we are truly honored to welcome a distinguished expert in the realm of addiction recovery. As a certified professional counselor and a licensed clinical pastoral therapist, he has devoted his career to helping those on the journey of recovery. Our guest stands out with his groundbreaking Inner Child Emotional Recovery Program, a truly pioneering approach to address the core emotional struggles that fuel addictive behaviors. He is also the esteemed author of Going Deeper: How the Inner Child Impacts Your Sexual Addiction, where he shares profound wisdom toward understanding the intricacies of addiction and the pathway to healing. His compassionate approach, coupled with a deep-seated knowledge, has made him a highly sought-after therapist and speaker. We are honored to have him join us today to share his wealth of insights. Without further ado, our guest, Dr. Eddie Capparucci. Thank you so much for joining us, and welcome to No Lions Here.
I'm so thrilled to be here. Thank you for inviting me, and I'm really looking forward to our discussion today.
Yeah, absolutely. So, in the introduction, I mentioned this was the book Going Deeper. This book was actually introduced to me at Beginning and Institute, and it was my first introduction to inner child work. And I'll tell you what, I was completely mind blown when I read this, and the wheels started turning and the dots started connecting, and there was so much in this book that I could relate to. So we're definitely going to be talking about the book, but first off, Dr. Capparucci, what got you started, and what led you into the field of sex addiction and this kind of work?
Well, Alex, that's an interesting question, and it's something that we could spend 3 or 4 hours talking about. But I'm
Yep.
going to really try to drill it down for you in like less than 5 minutes. Basically, it was a God thing. I too have my own struggles in this area. For many years, a womanizer. From the time I started at 16 till I was almost in my late 30s, never being able to stay in one relationship. Hopefully, maybe we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But what happened was after I went and had my treatment and finally figured out what was going on, I met my current wife, and that was 27 years ago. And she was a very strong Christian. I was a passive one. I went to church, I threw money in the collection pot, and I was done. And I went back out and lived in the world.
Mm.
But with her, she really kind of opened my eyes to to God's love, God's mercy, and I really put all my effort and energy into trying to develop a stronger relationship with Him. And I did that. I did it over a 2 year period, and then I started working and being in different groups with very godly men. And then one day, God said, "Hey, you know what? I don't want you in corporate America anymore." I was a advertising and marketing executive in the pharmaceutical world for about 25 years. And he goes, "I have something else for you." And I didn't like that at all. I was like, "No, I didn't. That's not part of the agreement here. I thought I was gonna, develop a closer relationship with you, but I didn't think you were gonna ask anything of me." Um, so I fought him for a couple years, which my wife just had a wonderful time watching on the sidelines, laughing the whole way, because she knew what the conclusion was going to be. And finally, I did. I surrendered. I said, "Okay, you know what? I give. I will. What if you want me to do?" And he goes, "You're going to be a Christian counselor." Now, there's a lot of components to the whole story that make it a lot
Sure.
more interesting than what I just talked about. But with that, I went back to college again and graduate school, got my master's in counseling, and did all the state work to become licensed. And I opened up a practice, and I thought, okay, I'm going to be a generalist. Right? That's what I'm going to do. Well, a few months later, as I'm doing this work, these guys start coming into my office that are struggling with pornography and sex.
Mm.
And I'm like, my God, they look like me. like I was, years ago,
Yeah.
several years ago. So that's what I knew. I said, okay, now I understand. He wants me here so that I can use what I've learned, my insight to help other men who are doing this struggle. And that's where it all began. And that was about 12 years ago that I've been now working, helping men to, again, deal with problematic sexual behaviors.
Wow. Yeah, that's a really, really great and interesting story of how you got into it. And it's so funny because, I grew up in the church. But I remember, I got about 18 and my mom was like, you don't got to go to church anymore. I'm not going to make you. And I was like, yep, I'm out. I'm going to go figure out my way in the world. Let's go out and have fun. Um, and then getting into recovery, it was like, okay, let me, talking about higher power. And I was like, okay, I'm God. Okay, that's my higher power. And realizing now that in recovery and with a relationship with God, my life has taken a turn. I mean, even just getting into recovery was not something that I thought was ever in the cards for me. The things I'm doing today, I did not think were in the cards for me. And if you would have told me years ago that, hey, this is where you're going to be at 35 years old, I would have laughed and said, nah, that's not me. Like you, I thought that, corporate world, rising up the ladder, that's where I'm meant to be. So it's really interesting and cool how, when we decide to, okay, all right, God, you've got a plan for me. It's really interesting to see where he can take us.
Yeah, and he did. I was really surprised by it. I wasn't expecting it at all. I thought I was just going to live out the rest of my days, as you just mentioned, continuing to work up the ladder, retire, and but yet still have a strong relationship with God.
Yeah.
And instead, he created a ministry that goes far beyond anything that I ever imagined. I mean, if you told me, you know, 12 years ago or 15 years ago when I began the whole process, yeah, well, one day you're going to be one of the leaders in the area of sex and porn addiction treatment. I would have said, "Oh, you out of your mind" at that point. But here we are, and I will tell you, I've been so blessed. To be able to watch God at work every day, and he does. He gets all the credit
Yeah.
for the books, for the speaking engagement, for all. He gets all the credit. He's the one who applies the words, the ideas, the concept. I'm just the vessel.
Yeah.
So, and I'm happy to be it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny because you're absolutely right there. Like I tell people this a lot, and it's, you know, I give God the credit. Like my higher power, he gets the credit. And they're like, well, yeah, but you're the one doing the work. You're the one. And it's like, yeah, but without him, I wouldn't be doing this work. He gives me the strength and the willingness to continue on even when I just don't feel like it. And so it's like, no, God gets the credit.
Yeah.
God gets the praise for what I'm doing because he gives me the strength.
Right, right. It was interesting when I was doing that fighting with him, and I surrendered, and my wife just loved this too. And I go, okay, look, I surrender, but on one condition. She goes, "You're bargaining with God?" Yes. There's also other people in the Bible who have done this. Okay, I have one condition. I go, you will not make me a good counselor. You will make me a great counselor. And what I mean by that is not so much that I, am so excellent at what I do, but that you will give me the hunger and the drive to be able to learn, continue to learn, and to absorb so that I have the knowledge and the wisdom to
Mm.
be able to help people along the way. And he has done that. That's one thing he has done, and I am just so grateful for him to keep his promise to me for that.
Yeah. You bring up a word there that's you hear a lot in the room, surrender. And I know a lot of people, I myself, I mean, I struggle with surrender. You know, realize what is surrender? Is it, do I throw my hands up and just not do anything? I think that with the way that my brain works and this addict black and white type of thinking, surrender, if I really break it down, sometimes it's I don't want to do anything, surrender. So when you talk about surrendering and surrendering, what did that look like for you in that time period?
Yeah, surrender is it's a word, and it's an issue, and it's a concept, and actually a practice that is somewhat difficult to kind of grasp and
Hmm.
wrap our hands around. For me, what it means is that what I've done is I've allowed the Holy Spirit to work through me. Okay. I have stopped, or at least I've tried. Let me put it that way. I've tried, Alex, to stop leading and stop saying, yeah, I want to run here, or I want to run there, or I want to take on this role, I want to take on this project, and instead discern to say, what is it that God wants me to be doing? What is going to be that's going to provide glory for Him in my actions? Now, I will be the first one to admit that although I try to live that lifestyle, I do not do it with perfection.
Mm.
There are many times somebody reaches out and says, hey, you know what? We want you to be part of this program. We want you to get involved with this project we have. And I'm like, sign me up, without really doing the due diligence I should to be able to determine, is that the right project for me or not? And I've gotten burnt by that a few times. I've gotten burnt. Where I wound up involved in something that I was like knee deep, and I'm like, I don't want to be here. I shouldn't be here. This is not, and I've had to back out. So I think I've gotten better at it, but yet I don't know if any of us ever perfect it. And I
Mm.
am of the belief that surrender is an ongoing process. It is like forgiving.
Mm.
Sometimes you have to forgive every day. Every day you have to forgive that person who, depending on the pain they had caused, that caused to you over the years. I think surrender is the same way, in a sense that, I believe I've given it all up, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh wait, no, I
Mm.
didn't. Here, I got to give you this too. And I'm not sure we ever get to the point where we are completely surrendered with all of it. But again, it's all a process. When we talk about spiritual growth, it is not something that we're going to wind up, okay, I hit the end. I'm good. I'm great. Here I am, the righteous one. That's never going to happen. And that's a lesson I learned a long time ago when I was beginning all of this. And I had a couple really good, um, older Christian men who said to me, you know what? We'd like to give you some advice. We can see that you're on this sprint. It's not a sprint.
Mm.
You're not going to get to the finish line. And then it's like, ooh, look, perfection. It's a marathon. And you will never, never be at that place. So I'm enjoying my marathon.
That's you hit it right on the head right there. Absolutely. As I know for me early on in recovery, it'll be 3 years for me in January when I got into recovery.
Congratulations.
Thank you. January 2021 was my introduction. It was a bad breakup. I had got discovered, kicked out of the house, basically cut off all
Mm,
contact, and went into treatment, and it was like, okay, I got to do this. I knew that I needed to get my stuff together. And very early on, it was like, all right, I'm doing this to get her back. Again, that sprint that you just talked about, that sprint, I got to get better. I got to get better now. And let's go.
yeah.
Let me just throw myself into this and just work, 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 work. She did not come back, which, took me some time to get over that. And yes, finally realizing that, like, yeah, I'm never, there is no destination here. The destination is they're lowering me into the ground. That's the destination. But this is a process. And
Right.
the dream is the process, is something that I try to
Yeah.
come back to a lot. So yeah, it's
Mhm.
definitely, but I know earlier on, a lot of people
Yeah.
can get stuck in that sprint mentality of, all right, I got to get better right now. And,
Mhm.
oh, I'm all
Right.
better.
It's about transformation.
Mm-hmm.
We're transforming. We're on the pathway of sanctification, and we're just trying to every day remove one of these ugly scales.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
and by the time we're ready for Judgment Day, we will be light years away from being righteous.
Mm.
Okay, but that's all right.
Yeah.
As long as we stay on the path of trying to, again, transform, trying to do the right thing, become men of integrity.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Which I can say, in my life today, my life looks a whole lot different than it did, 3 years ago in active addiction. And I'm really grateful for the program and for the gifts that it's given me. I mean, this right here. I would not be sitting
Mm-hmm.
here talking to you, Dr. Capparucci, if it wasn't for the program. So I'm very grateful for the program and, the work that you're doing in it. I want to talk a little bit about the book and kind of, what your motivation was and what brought you to look at the inner child model and how it relates to addiction.
Well, with me, the inner child model really started to all form with my own recovery. So let me go back. I'll tell the story, and again, I'll do it in a very concise manner. When I was 5 years old, excuse me, my dad died suddenly of a
Mm.
heart attack, and my mother had a nervous breakdown. And there were four kids. I was the third old in line, and we all got shipped out individually to relatives. Now, the relatives I got sent to, I didn't know these people. I'd never met them before. And this all happened in one night. My father died. My mother realizes she can't handle any of this. People come over the house, all the relatives come, and they each grab a kid.
Mm.
So I'm asleep. I wake up the next day. I'm in a strange house, strange bed. I'm with people I don't know. Nobody's talking to me about what happened. All they're saying is, you have to stay here for a while. Mommy and daddy are both sick. And I stayed there for almost a year.
Mm.
And my mom trying to recuperate from all of this. And then finally, I go back home. And at that time, my mother had to go off to work. We're talking about the mid 60s, okay? So my mom goes off to work, and I have two older sisters who are watching a 6-year-old, and they really don't want to watch a 6-year-old. So I spent a lot of time by myself in my room because we lived in a city. You couldn't go out and play. I didn't have friends like that. Um, so fast forward to now I'm about 16 and I start dating. And as I'm dating, I realize, you know what? I don't feel very content dating this one girl. I also want to date her and I want to date her. And that's what I do. And I continue that even though I get married, thinking, okay, this is the one, I'm going to settle down. It doesn't happen. And so therefore that marriage ended in divorce. Got married again. Thought, okay, this is it. Didn't happen. That marriage ended in divorce. And at that point, I was finally, you know what? I've had enough. I can't do this anymore. There's something wrong with me. Both women wanted to work on the relationship. I said, I can't. I'm sick. I'm a sick individual. And I went and I sought treatment. And in the treatment I sought with the psychologist, what she diagnosed was that I had an attachment disorder.
Mm.
I'm an avoidant. And the reason being is because as a young child, being separated from my parents, my attachment broke at that point. It broke off from them. And I was no longer bonding. And my kid at that age, my own inner child, came up with the ideas and the thought that the people who love you are unreliable and the people who love you will leave you.
Mm.
Now, this is all subconscious.
Sure.
I'm not aware of it.
Mm-hmm.
But as I go out and start dating, it's there.
Mm-hmm.
So the woman, the psychologist told me, she goes, you have 1 foot in and you have 1 foot out of every relationship.
Mm.
You don't know what it's like to put both feet in because you are scared that someone's going to leave you.
Mm.
And I started laughing. I was like, nobody's ever left me before. Well, your mom left you, your dad left you. I was like, no, my dad died. My mother had a nervous breakdown. She goes, yes, but they left you.
Mm.
That's the reason. And so I had to redefine it myself. What did it mean when they leave? Sometimes people leave not meaning to leave.
Yeah.
But as a child, when you're 5 years old, you don't know the difference.
Mm-hmm.
And so that, for me, and that was the pathway of my healing. And adding that with, again, meeting my wife and adding Christ into the picture. And that's what really got me to be, more than 27 years sober at this point. However, so that gave me the opening, the doorway to look at, wow, you know what? Maybe it is our unresolved childhood pain points that are still haunting us today. So then as I started doing my work with men and helping them with their problematic sexual behavior, I started to see these different childhood pain points that they were identifying. And at the time, I came up with 9. And today, there are now 12. There are 12 points, the most common childhood pain points, such as, the unnoticed child.
Mm-hmm.
That was me, okay? The sexually abused or sexually stimulated, early sexually stimulated child, right? The stressed child, the need for control, the unaffirmed. Again, there are 12 of them all together. And it was through this understanding that if men were to be able to go back and look and see what are those pain points that they're not really very aware of because they're mostly subconscious, many cases repressed more than suppressed, but still, if they could recognize those, that then what they can do is they can make real changes in their life. Because see, there's a second problem here, Alec. Not only do we have these pain points, the other problem that we have, people who deal with addiction, is they don't know how to sit with emotional discomfort.
Mm-hmm.
We can't sit with pain. So at a very young age, as a child, dealing with the bully down the street, the bad grade that I have coming, maybe a verbally abusive parent, whatever it might be. And there's no one here to show me how to deal with this pain. If I continue to sit with it, I'm either going to become very anxious or I'm going to become very depressed. So a child comes up with one solution. It is an amazing coping strategy. Amazing for a child
Mm-hmm.
who doesn't have a lot of worldly experiences and also is more emotionally based in their thinking than cognitively. I won't think about it.
Mm.
Super, great, great, great way to handle a
Yeah.
problem. Well, how do you do that? I distract myself. Too much television, too much food, too much sugar, too much, fantasy in my own head. And then I grow up, I take that same coping strategy and I become a teenager and I become a young adult and I become an adult. And all I do is I change out the behavior. And somewhere we stumble across sex. And that is our go-to.
Mm-hmm.
And the more we continue to go to it, the more we are bringing all that dopamine into our brain. Now it starts to become addictive.
Mm.
And that's the pattern that we have to wind up breaking. So that, to give you a summary of where the inner child model developed and how I then took it in my practice to expand it out.
Wow. Yeah. That's wow. I love these conversations for this because it gets my mind thinking and turning, and I'm like a sponge here. I'm just like soaking this all in. I think that this is so cool, that I get this opportunity to sit here and hear, how you just came up with, this inner child model work. And there's so many of these children, which I think everybody can relate to in this book. I know that myself personally, I kind of wrote some notes here, and there's, let's see, the emotional voided child, the stressed child, the early sexually stimulated child, the unnoticed, the unaffirmed. I mean, those are just right off the bat ones that I can relate to 100%. You know,
Right.
so when someone's reading this and they say, okay, hey, man, I can relate to 6 or 5 or 4 of these different child models, I know that it can probably be a little overwhelming, right? Because they're like, oh, where do I start? I don't know where to start. Where should one focus when they when they can relate to multiple of the children in there?
Yeah, well, again, the idea of we pick the kids because what the kids do is they represent those pain points that we suffered when we were younger. However, with the model, okay, again, it's a trauma model, the children aren't really the most important thing. What's most important are the core emotional triggers that
Mm,
activate each of those kids. So therefore, if you have, let's say, 5 children that you identify with, what I'm more concerned about is not the kid. I want to know what are those core emotional
mm,
triggers that activate your child that you've selected, because that is what's going to drive you at that point where you're going to wind up in a place where you're at risk of acting out. Okay.
yeah.
And if you want to give you a quick little
Yeah,
example of
absolutely.
how that could play out. Okay. Let's say you have a really, you know, good friend and you guys had a falling out. And, one day you meet on the street and start talking, and one of you says, hey, you know what? Maybe we should get together and see if we can work this out. And you say, okay, well, let's do that. Well, let's get together and have lunch. So you schedule lunch. Well, the day of lunch comes, and all of a sudden you get a phone call. Hey, look, something came up. I can't make it. You know what? I'll get back to you. Hangs up. You're sitting there, you're holding on to the phone. You're like, what the heck? I mean, that was 6 seconds. He didn't even give me a chance to say anything. I feel like I got blown off. I feel like I've been dismissed. Okay. So now you're sitting here and your anxiety level, and this is really important. Okay. Anxiety.
Mm,
Let's do everybody hold on to that thought for a moment.
okay.
So your anxiety, which might have been maybe a 1 or 2, because I think we always have
Hmm.
anxiety, now becomes like a 4. Because you're like, you're frustrated. You wanted to go to lunch. You feel like it was kind of rude of what he did. So it's about a 4. Your kid goes into his storage unit, your inner child, and he pulls out an event that he's telling you, we felt this pain
Mm,
before, and it was awful. Now, you're not aware of what he pulled out, okay? But as he pulls it out, your anxiety level now continues to rise, okay? And as it continues to go, and as our anxiety increases, what also increases? Compulsiveness.
mhm,
When compulsiveness increases, what also increases? The risk of making bad decisions. So the event that this kid pulled out this time is the time when you were about 10 years old and you went down to Bobby's house to see if he could come out to play. You knock on his door and Bobby opens the door and you see Bobby in there with 3 of your friends and you're like, what are you guys doing? He goes, oh, we're just hanging out. Why didn't anybody call me? We didn't think about it. Like, well, all right. Well, can I come in? No, my mom said we can't have anybody else and slammed the door in your face. So now you go home and again, you're walking home and you're feeling rejected. You're feeling dismissed. You're wondering, why doesn't anybody ever chase me? Why do I have to chase them? Nobody will come and see if I want to go out and play. Well, your inner child thinking that phone call was very similar in nature.
mm,
And so therefore he's saying, we felt this pain before. It's horrible. Now, you can't sit with pain. Your anxiety is going higher and higher and higher. You're thinking it's just about the phone call. It's not. It's about past emotional events that also happen that are exacerbating your emotions. And as your anxiety continues to grow and rise, now also your compulsiveness starts. And now it's like, okay, your risk of acting out has increased dramatically.
mm.
And because I can't sit with the pain, I run. because that's what we are. We're runners.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you talked a little bit about that. You talk about that in the book. So in an instant like that, something happens because right, like, and I think that recovery teaches us that any situation that arises that brings up anything within inside of us, it's not actually that situation. It's something that is much deeper that's going on, at least in my experience. So in that moment, is it, what is the appropriate thing to do as someone in recovery? Is it, hey, okay,
Right.
I need to obviously recognize what's going on, name what's going on. Is it, and what's the next appropriate steps for someone to safely
Right. Well,
navigate that?
again, when we're in our addiction, what happens is there'll be a negative event. The child would be activated by the negative event, and our anxiety increases because of it. And then we run away. Okay, we
Mm-hmm.
go and act out. That's what happens in when we are not before we go into recovery. In the inner child model, there's three more things. The first thing is, one, I need to slow everything down. I slow everything down. If I feel my anxiety start to increase, to be able to say, okay, what the event that just happened, does it match up with any of my core emotional triggers? And if it does, that means my kid has been activated. So now I know my kid's activated. I continue to slow things down. And what I'm going to do now, what we teach people to do, is something they've never done before. They're going to sit with that emotional discomfort. It is what I feel. What do I feel? Let's go back to our example just a moment
Mm-hmm.
ago. What do I feel? Well, I feel dismissed. I feel belittled. I feel like, I got blown off. I don't think he wants to be my friend. I don't think he wants to work this thing out. That's what, he's just a coward. Instead of just telling me about it, he's just doing it like that. That's what I feel. I feel all of that. Right? Okay, good. We're sitting with it. We're not running away from it. Now we're going to move to the second step where we're going to take what I feel and we're going to move it over to what is real.
Mm-hmm.
And so now what I feel is loaded with childlike emotions, loaded with them,
Mm-hmm.
loaded with false assumptions. Okay? I come over here, what is real? Well, what's real? He was rude. He could have gave me a second just to say something, right? I do feel dismissed. Those are both valid. Does he not want to get together? I don't know. Does he really not want to try to work it out? I don't know. I don't have, you know what? I don't have enough information. Alex, I don't have enough
Mm-hmm.
information here. So now I go to the last step, and that is make the wise choice. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to wait. I'm going to give him a couple days, see if he called me. If he called me, say, hey, what's going on? Are you all right? Is everything good? Maybe it was a real emergency, right? And say, well, do you want to still get together? If he says, yeah, absolutely, great, we're fine. If he says no, maybe I say to him, do you need more time? Is this too soon for you? Do you need to talk, think about it more? Because if that's what you need, fine, it's good with me. I've slowed everything
Mm-hmm.
down. We're not being compulsive any longer. My anxiety has increased because I have all the what I feel emotions. Again, most of them more driven by my inner child. But once I move over here to what is real, I lose a lot of those. They're gone.
Yeah.
And now what I'm left with is rational thinking.
Mm.
And now I can make a healthy choice.
Yeah.
That's what the model is about. But the whole premise for a lot of it is to slow everything down. People who are addicted, their heads are down and they're running through life. They are not paying attention to what's going on around them. And that's what I try to get people to do, to start to be more mindful of their surrounding and what's going on within me. How am I doing mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually? Every day, several times a day, because it changes and it shifts. And when that does, what's going to happen is going to drain you. And if you're drained in any of those areas, mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, bad things happen.
Yeah.
Why? Because the brain is screaming for stimulation. And so therefore that negative event comes or it doesn't even come, the fact that you're just drained and you want stimulation, you're just running. You're not stopping.
Yeah. What a great reminder too to slow down. I know that I need that reminder for myself in my
Me
life.
too.
Like, and I think that a lot of people in recovery can relate to that. Just slowing it down. The benefit from just slowing it down. And I think, no, I don't got time to slow down. I have to just go, go, go. But I also am a distractaholic. Like I can distract myself. I could teach a master's course on distraction if I really wanted to, you know? And I think a lot of addicts could it also, you know, just slowing it down. So I really appreciate that perspective. And I think that that's really helpful for people in recovery.
It is the number one, that's my number one rule. Okay. And the way I even say it, my clients laugh at me. My peers do too. Slow everything down. And I must say it 50 times a week to people. Because if we don't do that, then the anxiety will stay ahead of us. The compulsiveness will stay ahead of us. And the risk of acting out will remain higher. So that has to be the bedrock for what we do. And you're right. For people who have an addictive brain, that is a challenge. And that's why things like mindfulness, yoga, those types of things, quiet time, are all critical. But yet, you talk to people about that, and they're like, "Oh no, I can't sit still. That's not." Well, okay, you need to learn. I can't learn. Yes, you can. You can learn. You can learn. You may not be great at it. Okay, I don't expect you to go to Zen. I don't expect a blank mind. I'm not looking for that. But just to slow down so that you can allow your rational thinking to catch up with your emotion. Because people who have addiction are driven on raw emotion. They're not driven with rational thinking.
Yeah.
Okay, well, you know what? I really have this urge to go and shoot up. But you know what? If I go do that, I'm first and foremost, all the stuff I'm supposed to be responsible for over the next 6 hours is not going to happen. There's going to be people who are going to be upset with me. After I'm done, I'm not really going to feel very good. Then I'm going to have to do it again. They're not having that conversation. There's no rational thinking going on. It's just that I need it. I need this. Does that not sound like a kid?
That does.
It's a kid. I need it. Why do you need it? Because. Just because I need it. Because if I don't, I'll feel sick. Go, yeah, you probably will feel sick. Maybe you will. You're going to have withdrawals. But we could do something about that. No. That means I have to sit with pain. I don't want to sit with pain. I'm going to go do this. If with all addictions.
Yeah.
Whether it's smoking a cigarette, whether it is food, all of it. They're driven by emotional distress, emotional discomfort. And it doesn't have to be a big thing. It can be something very little. It's driven by that we can't handle because we can't sit with the discomfort. And so therefore we go and we engage because that's the easier thing to do.
Yeah. I often find that the smaller things are much harder to deal with than what my sponsor likes to call the billboard problems, right?
You know why?
Why is that?
because we blow them off
Mm.
most of the time. What we do is we'll just take them and we're like, oh, forget it, it's nothing. It's not a big deal. And yet, it is a big
Mm-hmm.
deal. So it's still lingering under the surface. There's anxiousness that's there. That's the other problem with people who have addictive brains. We don't understand how anxious we are. If we stop, the body keeps the
Yep.
score, the book, I'm sure you've
Mm-hmm.
heard of that,
Yep.
right? I mean, if you think about it and you really sit and take the time to be quiet and silent, boy, you're going to feel a lot of things in your body that you don't even know are there. And it's all anxiety. It's all. But anyway, go back to your point there that we blow those little things off. Not a big deal, whatever. It is a big deal because, in a way, in a sense, that it's causing anxiousness. So now let them continue to pile up.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Pile up. And so therefore you may not go and act out this hour or even today, but you may act out 3 days from
Yep.
now
A slow burn.
because it just sat there and it manifested itself.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Yeah. And anxiety for me is one, I didn't even realize what anxiety was until about 2018. Was my first time where I was like, I remember I was on a ski trip and we were like,
Right.
we weren't getting there quick enough. And I was like, and I asked a buddy, I said, I'm feeling this certain way. Is that anxiety? And he was like, yeah, it is. And I was like, oh, okay. And from then on, I kind of saw it more and more, but it didn't play. I didn't do anything about it, obviously, until I got into recovery. And then recovery, it was like, oh my gosh, I am constantly dealing with anxiety and fear. And oh my gosh, I cannot believe that basically my entire life I have just lived in fear. I just feel
And,
unsafe.
and that's why you distract
Yeah.
yourself all the
Yes.
time because that takes away. Because if you were to really sit when you were younger,
Mhm.
you would have felt that. That's what you felt at a very young age. You felt that discomfort. And it's like, this isn't good. I don't like this. And nobody's showing me how to deal with it. So again, I won't think about it. I'll distract myself. And that's why you could become a professor in
Yeah.
distraction because you have all that experience. But that again is a driver in our addictive process that has to be eliminated.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, you want to go play Candy Crush a little bit? Fine. I'm not saying you can't have some mindless entertainment. You can do that. But if you're going to be sitting around with the family and you're sitting there playing Candy Crush, which I know people who do that, okay, and they're still trying to have the conversation. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think you're right about that. That's a problem.
Yeah.
Because what it is what you're running away from is having that deep, intimate conversation. You're up here on a 10,000-foot level.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think that in today's world with technology, smartphones, I mean, how often do you see that's what I love about going to meetings and being in those rooms. And I know for a long time I was doing Zoom meetings and, because of COVID. And then, I don't know, probably about a year and a half into my recovery, I got away from Zoom meetings and focused on in-person meetings. Because, I mean, how often in today's world do you see people just sitting there talking without some kind of screen in front of them?
Yep.
And I know that I'm very much guilty of it. If I'm having a conversation, I find that I do this with my mother when she's talking to me. I will pace around, I'll grab my phone, I'll look at it all while she's talking, simply because I don't want to be in that conversation with her because it brings up
Right.
things that I don't like the feeling
Yeah.
of.
Right now, we are in a crisis when it comes to sex and porn addiction. Because of this, there's going to be a tsunami. It is coming. And the reason it's going to get worse, two things. One, kids are being exposed at a younger and younger age. We think that the last, it's hard, statistics are all over the board. but most statistics that have been coming out when it comes to exposure are showing around 10 to 12 years
Mm,
old. Okay, that's very
yeah.
young for the brain to be able to be exposed to that type of material, especially since the fact is we're not talking about Playboy and Penthouse anymore. We're not talking about a picture of a naked woman. We're talking about hardcore, violent, degrading, humiliating stuff
Hmm.
that's being done out there. The second reason is the uptake that we're seeing in women who are now watching more and more pornography. Those numbers continue to rise. And in fact, I have next month, the latest book, Going Deeper for Women, will be released.
Oh, wow.
And that is going to be about women who deal with love and sex
Mm.
addiction. And we put that, I co-wrote that with a couple of colleagues of mine, women who work in that space. And we've identified 10 different little girls who, and the reason why they struggle, their pain point. So this is going to be huge. I'm 66 years old. Okay. I'm getting to the end. We really need the younger people. We need folks like you who, again, what you've done is you've taken your own brokenness and you are now using that to educate people. And I thank you so much. And I thank God for you and your work and what you do because it is so important because these kids are being left
Mm.
unsupervised. And so therefore they're learning about what is sex through porn. They're learning about what they think is love through
Mm.
porn. They're learning about what they think relationships is
Mm.
through porn. And it's all wrong.
Hmm.
Because the big message that kids are getting is little boys are being taught it's okay to
Mm.
objectify little
Mm.
girls. And worse yet, little girls are being taught it's okay to be
Mm.
objectified. That's a horror story.
Yeah.
A horror
Hmm.
story. Because when I was growing up and when you were growing up and me later, way later than you, we didn't have all of it. And yet, there are people like me who still wound up in trouble.
Yeah. I was just going to say, yeah, I didn't have, I couldn't imagine growing up today. I mean, I lived a very sheltered, I remember my first introduction was, it was a crumpled up page out of a porno magazine that I found randomly in the woods in the middle of nowhere. And I can still remember the images and the stories on that piece of paper and remember going to try to go back to try to find that growing and so I can't imagine what it's like growing up today in the world that we have and the technology at our fingertips and just yeah, it's
That's why I said it's gonna get worse. And now with AI
mm,
and what's going on there with that, I mean it is I my heart breaks not just for the kids who are being subjected to all of it. It also breaks for the counselors and the coaches and everyone else who's gonna be left with this
mm,
mess to try to do it. Because right now people are struggling to find coaches and counselors to help them. Okay, people who really are very knowledgeable and can do this. We need more. We need more. It is a major problem.
yeah, you bring that point up. I'm actually taking courses. I've got class tonight to become a certified recovery coach. And
Oh, excellent.
in all of this, with the goal of bringing this into the S community. Um, but from what I'm seeing is there's really the advocacy around sex and love and porn addiction. It's not there, and
Yep.
it's motivating and inspiring, but it's also like it's really sad too. to think that, wow, this has been going on and around for just as long as all these other addictions, and that there's just like not much advocacy or work being done in the S community.
No.
And it's inspiring.
Right. Yeah, we're seeing some of it. We're seeing more of it start to develop, which is good. But I mean, go back to the problem with women. I mean, the resources that are available for women, I could fit in the palm of my hand.
Yeah.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And what we're putting together and bringing out is probably the first thing that's been put out new in quite some time. I think what we're also putting out is something that goes much deeper, going deeper. That's what it is. That's what we're
Yep.
trying to do here with all of the stuff we do, to get women to understand, why is it that they're struggling? Why does sex have such a stronghold on their life? And I think, again, I believe that when people answer that question, that why question, they're empowered.
Yeah.
Just like I was. Once I figured out the answer to it, and I realized I have 1 foot in and 1 foot out, and I was really seeking emotional intimacy, but I was seeking it through physical intimacy. And I just didn't know it. I was oblivious to all of it. But once it was there, got sobriety for almost 27 years.
That's awesome. Wow, congratulations on that. That's huge. That is huge, and a true testament to that. Recovery works. Recovery really does work.
It does work.
People can recover.
Right. You just have to put in the effort.
Yeah.
You have to put in the time. You have to sacrifice. You have to understand that, you know what? I really appreciate when a guy says, yeah, you know what? I did like looking at porn. I'm glad you admit that. I'm glad you admit it. And you know why? Because it served a purpose.
Mm-hmm.
It served a purpose. It helped you not deal with the emotional distress that was within you. Okay? And it served at this high level of stimulation. It almost works. It almost works. But then you have to stop. And now everything comes back. So therefore, it's not a solution. It's not a good solution because it doesn't work. And what it does, it just makes everything else around you toxic, corroded, ugly. So therefore, let's find a different approach to all of it. And I think, we're seeing a lot of men with the going deeper model. I mean, it's being used throughout the whole globe, which, again, praise God.
Yeah.
Never thought that would be the case, but it is. And I just, hope that, try to expose as many people to it as possible, just through your work and other people's work, because it's needed. It's desperately needed.
Yeah, it really is. I think that it is definitely it's a refreshing take on recovery, and it really adds another layer of recovery. Because I think that recovery in so many is so many different things, and there's so much that you can do in recovery. But I think that I know, especially for me, that inner child model is something that is really helped, and I try to talk about it as much as I can because I want other people to know about it. Because it really is important to realize, hey, there is still a child inside of me that is trapped at that young age. And essentially, when I'm, like we've kind of talked about, when I'm in that addictive cycle, that's who's driving the bus. It's not some green goblin running around in my head wanting to burn everything down. It's actually my child who's hurting. And he wants to be seen and loved and doesn't know how to express that. So he says, hey, I know what we can do. This feels good. Let's go there. Let's do that.
Right. Because he's afraid.
Yeah.
He's afraid. He doesn't know how to deal with the discomfort. Doesn't want to deal with the discomfort. So, I mean, and you're right. I mean, when it comes to recovery, I get people who come in and they got this laundry list of stuff they're doing. And I'm like, you know what? That's really nice. that you're doing all of that. But I mean, let's stay focused. And by staying focused is one, let's answer the why question. Why does sex have a stronghold on you? Okay, let's answer that. Two, let's look at the process of how you can deal with the core emotional triggers. Three, community. Community, community. You need to be in community because there's going to be times that kid is going to make his way much further along than you want him to. And you're going to need to be able to call somebody, talk to someone so that they can bring you back down. So for me, that right there with recovery, and then later on, as we become sober, then we look at the idea, okay, being sober is not enough. I now need to be more emotionally engaged. That goes through the book that I wrote, Why Men Struggle to Love. Okay, talking about the idea that we are emotionally undeveloped and how do we now strengthen ourselves in those 14 areas that I outlined, I call blind spots. But that should be recovery.
Yeah.
It could be simple, but yet very profound and deep because it's all about self-reflection. The more I learn about myself, the better man I can become.
Yeah. Amen. Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because you don't realize, that word simple. You don't realize that some of this stuff in recovery, it is simple. It's not these crazy.
Easy.
Yeah.
Not always easy.
No, right, exactly. But it's simple, and I can oftentimes forget that. A simple phone call. I'm having a tough day. A simple phone call of just laying out exactly what I'm feeling and what's going on, and then at the end of that phone call being like, "Oh wow,
Right.
I feel a lot better." That was really simple.
Yeah. That's why you also see a lot of betrayed partners who don't like the idea of it being simple. They think that it should be complex. They think it should be a lot of different stuff. You should always be doing something. That's because they're afraid.
Sure.
They're afraid that, if everything starts to quiet down, that he'll go back to where he was. And I understand the
Yeah,
fear.
absolutely.
I fully understand it. But yet, if a man is doing the work that needs to be done and he's being consistent with that, it doesn't have to be a pile of books this deep. Okay? It doesn't have to be 4 meetings every day for the rest of your life. That doesn't have to be the case. There is recovery. I do believe there should be some sort of recovery work that's happening for the rest of our
Sure.
lives. I do believe that being in a community for the rest of your life is a good thing to do. Okay. I do believe those things. It may not have to be an SA, SSA. It could be a, men's group that you're in at some point, that you're learning more about what does it really mean to build upon your integrity. Okay. Those are things, but we should never end our quest for self-reflection. We should always be learning about ourselves. I'm still doing it. 27 years later, I learned things about myself. My wife and I had a conversation about it yesterday. We are talking about some things on both parts of us that we need to continue to work on. Because like I said, we're never going to be perfect.
Yeah.
Never.
Yeah. I recently came up with a metaphor of like road work. Like my recovery is like road work. There's always some kind of maintenance that needs to be done on the road. Doesn't mean I have to always be shutting down both lanes and doing complete overhauls. Sometimes it's just filling a pothole here, repainting a line here. There's always some kind of work to be done. And it's exciting when you can finally get to the point in your recovery where you're like, wow, this all has a benefit and I am benefiting and growing and becoming a better person. It's exciting when you get to that point because it changes from, oh, I have to do this to I get the opportunity to learn more about myself and to improve myself. Absolutely.
Right. It's also exciting in a sense that it changes your perception about
Mm.
yourself, right? What was I telling, the women in my life before I went and got help? I'm sick. I really meant, I think I'm emotionally, ill. There's something wrong with me. Um, and yet then when I found out, it was like, oh wow, you know what? Yes, I do have a emotional, illness, disorder. I have that disorder. It's an attachment disorder. Oh, I do have an addictive brain. Oh, I do have a compulsive disorder. Oh, okay. Well, wow. At least I'm not a pervert. Okay. I could take that label off, and now it's like, okay, I have an addictive brain, I have a compulsive disorder, and I have a attachment disorder. I can work with all of
Yeah.
those. I can work with them. Versus you're going to tell me I have some sort of mental disorder, which I'll have perhaps, that I'll never be able to really manage. This I can manage very effectively. And that's what it's about. It's about managing. It's not about
Mm.
curing. And I had somebody reach out to me last week and said, I really need to work with you because, I've been listening to what you have to say. And he goes, I really want, I know you can help me, be cured of this. And I'm thinking to myself, well, you've been listening to me. You haven't really heard very much of what I said because I don't think we can be cured. What we can do is manage it, but you can manage it very, very effectively.
Absolutely. Definitely. 100%. Yep. I totally believe in that it's not something that can be cured, but it definitely, like you said, becomes more manageable. Absolutely. Well, Dr. Capparucci, Dr. Capparucci, I want to be mindful of your time. I just thank you so much for taking the time to come on to No Lions here and share some of your journey and your perspectives. There's a lot of great reminders in this conversation, and I just thank you so much, man. It really means a lot to me. I'm really grateful that we got to connect today. Where can the people find your books and the work that you're doing?
Yeah, all my books are available exclusively at Amazon. They'll find the Going Deeper, they'll find the Going Deeper workbook, they'll find Why Men Go to Love, the Shame Label, the new book about for women will be out in December. There was another new book that got published a couple months ago, and that is about all addiction, not just sex addiction, but it's understanding your inner child and overcoming your addiction. So we covered through all of that, and I partnered with someone over at he's the director of the London Center for Addiction. So very excited about that work also. So yeah, they can find everything they need there on Amazon. And if anyone wants to reach out to me, if they have questions, I always like to help people if I can. They can reach me at edcappa, EDCAPPA at gmail.com. I'm not taking new clients. However, I've trained lots of clinicians on the inner child model. And so therefore I can provide referrals for anyone who needs them.
Awesome. I'll definitely put some links in the description for this episode as far as where we can find your books, as well as your email address for anybody who has any questions that can reach out. Again, Dr. Capparucci, thank you so much, one, for the work that you're doing. You're making
No.
an impact one life at a time. So thank you so much for the work you're doing. And again, thank you so much for coming on to No Lions here, man. I really appreciate it and hope to have you back on in the future. We can talk a little bit more recovery.
I would love it.
Awesome.
I would love it. God
Thanks,
bless you,
Eddie.
Alex.
Il y a un nom, celui qui